And it happens incrementally, so even when it does happen, people don't really notice it. They're probably on a bunch of somas, as Aldous Huxley wrote about, and are nice and quiet, and they're happy, with the slavery they've been provided, I guess. Well, I mean, and that's really what it all comes down to. And what are we, again, as I just asked, what are we supposed to think here? And I think that ultimately, I mean, we have a right to think for ourselves, something the government doesn't want us doing. This is how they criticize us. How does this work out? And by the way, before I ask you that question, I'm going to make a statement. I have friends on the far left, believe it or not, and they're against it too. In fact, Cindy Sheehan is out protesting Obama tomorrow at Marxist Vineyard, and she wants people to hear her side of the story. He has gone and done everything he can to minimize her impact and to make sure that people don't hear what she has to say. So far leftists or paleo liberals seem to understand all of this. It's the Kool-Aid drinkers who are the phony left and the phony right who never understand this stuff. But let me go back to our line of questioning here. First of all, how's this going to work out? Do you have any predictions on this? How is it all going to come? How's it going to come out in the wash? Are we going to get some little, small bill that can grow and go through, or is it going to be completely defeated? And what happens if it is defeated?
Well, I was reading a little bit about this morning, and if you look back to when the Democrats took control of Congress after the 06 election, they could have shut the war down right away. They had the power to do that. And yet they didn't. They blew hot air, big, but when it came down to it, they didn't have the stomach to, be the ones that ultimately made that decision. And I'm seeing signs of that with healthcare. Because right now, you got a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. You hold, a huge majority in the House. You have the vote right now, in theory, to ram this through. And I think that's certainly a possibility. But
that's what they're going to do.
It may. I think it's ultimately going to come down to conservative-leaning blue dogs. If they're going to want, how much cover they're going to want for the 2010 election. And if they want, demand enough cover, you're going to get what you mentioned earlier is kind of an incremental step to this, something that can be expanded. And as a new parent, I saw the starting of this with some of the talk of expanding S-chip. And there was some talk earlier in the year about expanding S-chip roughly for a family of four. If you made under 84,000, 80,000, don't quote me on the number, but right around in the mid-80s, that you could qualify for the Children's Healthcare Initiative. And by de facto then, socializing family health coverage for anybody under, $80,000 or $85,000 for a family of four. And so that's my other fear, and maybe bigger fear is that if we get something incremental, we're just going to have what you talked about earlier is this, step by step, erosion of private health care, and people are going to say, well, it's not that bad, and it happens so slowly that pretty soon we wake up one day and,
Did you know, Jason, that children that are on Medicaid are on the SSRI drugs, serotonin uptake reinhibitors, otherwise known as psychotic drugs like Zoloft and Prozac, to a degree of upwards to 50% more than the rest of the children who do not have Medicare. And this is one of the things that we are tracking and following. So the more kids that are on nationalized health care, the more kids will be drugged. And then Obama just made this big deal with the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, and as a teacher, my wife and I have seen firsthand exactly what you're talking about. And, we're kind of shifting gears here just a bit. But when you had welfare reform in the 90s, people who are going to game the system are still going to game the system. And so you saw huge numbers of people move over to Medicare and get diagnosed with a disability. And so in classrooms, we're seeing, formerly kids on welfare now being diagnosed with some psychological disorder so they can be on Medicare. And we're allowing that, and so we're expanding the roles. And you're absolutely right. You're going to see a balloon of not only children but adults living off the system. And that's the problem with Europe, is that when the government's giving you something, you're not going to vote, or you're less likely to vote against your own interests, and you don't want to give up what you're getting. And that's the difficult thing in Germany. They have an aging population. These people want their benefits. They want their 6 weeks vacation. They want their guaranteed retirement, and nobody's willing to make the hard decision until...
It seems like bribery, doesn't it? I mean, they're paying them off to shut up about it and just take, as you say, game the system, and then it becomes extortion at a certain point where if you don't do it, they're going to lock you up or fine you, which is part of Obama's incremental plan here. Let's move to unemployment. 10% unemployment is the norm in Europe. You say it might become the norm here if we continue to move towards big government economies. And I want to know, what happens to the entrepreneurs in Europe? But to talk about unemployment for a second, let's talk about energy real quick. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, my wife and I, this was a great statistic. We paid for what it cost us to power our washing machine in Germany for 1 year. We can power our entire house in the United States for 8 months. That kind of gives you an idea of the cost of energy. And it's just basically a tax. You have a huge tax on any sort of business operation, and so it's that's what it is. You have
taxing the rich. They're taxing the poor people that have washing machines. I can't believe what I'm hearing.
We could when Cash for Clunkers first came out, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, "This is Berlin." Because they have very regressive taxes on their automobiles and their transportation, and it ends up hurting the poor much more.
Hey, can you stay with me for a few minutes on the other side of this break? We'll wrap it up. Plug your book again. Stay with us, folks. It is Jeremy Marsh, and his site is survivingeuphoria.com. We'll be right back after this.